Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Wedding Buzz. Today, I have a friend on here with me. Her name is Cheri Wellman. She is a realtor with Keller Williams Realty in Wellington. Cheri has been a full-time licensed realtor in our area for 16 plus years. She works with all types of residential buyers and sellers, including buyers that want to upsize, buyers that want to downsize, investors, vacation home buyers, distressed sellers, sellers in probate, luxury buyers and sellers, and of course, first-time home buyers. Cheri has a bachelor's degree from Florida State University Business School. She grew up in West Palm Beach, where she met and married her husband, Pete. They will be married 38 years in August. They raised their 2 daughters here. Their primary home is in Wellington, and they have a beach home in Jensen Beach. Cheri owns and manages furnished rental properties and understands the ins and outs of real estate investing. Although her office is in Wellington, she services all of Palm Beach County along with Martin and St. Lucie counties. Keller Williams Realty offices are located throughout the U.S. and in almost every country on the globe. So with her network of teammates, she can help you buy or sell real estate anywhere in the world. She promises top-notch service. Check out her reviews on her Facebook page, Cheri Wellman, in the photo album titled Client Testimonials. Thank you so much for being here and doing this with me.
Thanks so much, Sydney. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and I didn't know that you had a beach house in Jensen Beach. My in-laws live. They live in Nettles Island.
Oh, okay. That's like across the street.
It's like across the street. Yeah. They're moving soon, but we go up to that area kind of often. It's so pretty. So yes, this is a wedding podcast and you are a realtor, but I thought it was so fitting because a lot of couples are purchasing their first home when they're getting married. So what advice do you have for couples who are both planning a wedding and looking to buy their first home simultaneously? Are there any specific considerations or challenges that couples should be aware of when balancing wedding expenses and saving for the down payment of a house?
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm excited to talk about real estate as it applies to newlyweds or almost anyone. So my opinion on that is to get married first. It's just a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about name changes after you have a deed, that says you own a home, which that's not horrible, but it's just a little bit smoother if you have your name change first.
Yeah.
I am a big believer in trying not to go into debt too much. So my advice would be, if you were planning both of those things, to, not go into debt over your wedding so that you have a little bit of a nest egg for your down payment on your first home. And I'm just a believer in living below your means, as much as possible. I do believe that home ownership builds wealth. So I think it's an awesome goal to have. If you say you get married and you say, there's just no way we can get a house right away. We need to rent. Just always have that goal out there of saving for a down payment and to be a homeowner when you can. I do understand that you're going to be having a podcast coming up that talks about budgeting, and I'm really big into budgeting and sticking with, your budget and, putting your goals on paper and things like that. So just a couple ideas I have for keeping the wedding more reasonable are, well, for one thing, buying your product, which I think is awesome. Because we have so many DIYers nowadays, it seems like. I know that some venues don't charge as much for an afternoon wedding as they do for an evening wedding. One idea that I've seen some couples do recently is say their parents are paying for the wedding and they have it covered, but for their honeymoon, what I've seen some people do is they actually, as part of like the wedding registry, like for gifts, they've actually divided up parts of their honeymoon, like for example, an oceanside dinner because they're going to be near the beach, $100, or 2 of us going kayaking down the river if they're going to be near a river, $50, things like that. So the guests can actually pay.
I did a little bit of that for my registry, and I honestly wish that I did it more. I felt like, I have to have all these items, like household items on my registry, and although I appreciate everything that I got, and I do use a lot of it, there are some things that I'm like, I really could have just used the money for my mortgage payment or like for the down payment of our house instead of all of these gifts. But those are like very good ideas to keep the wedding costs down. And it's true. I mean, the wedding is just one day, and of course you want it to be a beautiful event and a beautiful wedding, but you are starting a life together, and owning a home is such a key part of that. And it is a big investment, but hopefully it will grow your wealth like in the future. It's a good thing to work towards. What are some key factors that couples should consider when deciding on a location for their first home, especially if they have like a different preference or different priorities?
So, this can vary from couple to couple, because some people, it's a higher priority to be near their parents or a family member when they buy a home. For others, that's not so much a priority as being close to their job, so they don't have to spend a lot of time driving. So what a couple can do that will really help a realtor is to kind of be a unified front and to come up with like 5 major must-haves. And if they can agree on it and say to their real estate agent, these are the things we need, we have to have, it's almost a deal breaker if we can't have them. So if they are a united front and they agree on those things, then as a realtor, I can find them houses that meet that criteria. Sometimes the main criteria can change. Like once we've looked at a couple homes, they say, I realize, for example, I don't want a 0 lot line. I decided I want a bigger yard. So maybe those top 5 priorities will change. But as long as you guys, the husband and wife agree, and you can, convey to the realtor, this is what we want. And I do help my clients come up with a pros and cons list too. If they ever say, we're kind of stuck between these two homes in 2 different locations. I mean, we can go through a list and draw up some pros and cons and let them decide what's more important to them.
That's really helpful. And I mean, it's really hard. And you said something like the husband and wife agreeing on it. And sometimes that can be tough, especially if we're talking about a young couple who is buying a home right off the bat of their wedding. They might be a little bit more in that honeymoon phase and a little bit more of like, whatever you want. And a couple years down the line, when you're in the home, and then you might not be so happy. And so I think it is really important to truly sit down and think about, what do you want? What is important to you? What is important to your spouse? And then see what overlaps and how you can combine those. And that's great that you help couples with a pro and con list, because it's a big decision. It's a hard, big decision. Yeah.
And sometimes, say there's, they give their top 5 and then they also really want a swimming pool. Well, that is something you can add later. So sometimes it's easier to prioritize by what is going to be not very likely to happen later. We would want that now. And then things that would be easier to do later, that's always, I know in my personal home, we built the home and then we did the pool like a year and a half later.
Yeah. So to kind of in that pro con process, figure out what can we add or what can we change? And then the surrounding area is what it is. I mean, unless they start building around it or something, but like the location of the home, you have to really both agree on the location of the home, because it's not just easily going to change.
For sure.
Yeah. Can you explain the different types of mortgages and financing options available to first-time home buyers? What are the pros and cons of these? Because I guarantee couples going into their first home don't understand this unless they work in the field.
Right. So I am not a lender, but as a realtor, I have to work very closely with lenders. And a lender is totally like part of your team when you're going to submit an offer on a home. And they're a critical part of the contract, actually, because whenever you're going to buy a home, you have to show how you're going to pay for it. If you are blessed enough to have cash, then we call it proof of funds. You show a bank statement. If you're going to have a mortgage, you would want to bring a lender letter. And sometimes the strength of that letter makes your offer look stronger. So that's one of the reasons your lender is so important. So there are 3 main types of loans. There is a VA loan. That's for veterans. And those are 0 down payment. That's a benefit to veterans. Is just, there's zero down payment. However, they will have closing costs. There's an FHA loan, which is a 3.5% down payment, and they will have closing costs. And then there's a conventional loan, which can range from like 3% on up to like 25%. So when I say down payment percentage, that's a percentage of the purchase price. So, whatever 3.5% of the purchase price is, that would be your down payment. You still need money for closing costs, and the lender would help you figure those out. They'll give you an estimate. The down payment is different from an escrow deposit. An escrow deposit is your money, but it's like what you put on your offer to say, when I make this offer to you to show that I'm serious, I'll put this amount of money into escrow with the title company. So that's a different thing than the down payment. That can go towards your down payment. The escrow deposit is basically what would be at risk if you were to breach the contract with a good real estate agent. We would never let that happen. It's all about meeting deadlines in the contract. So, but right now, there's a couple neat things. Sometimes if a young person has just started their business and they said, I know I have to give 2 years of tax returns to the lender, but I had so many expenses because I just started this business. On paper, it doesn't really look like I earned money, even though I did. So in the cases like that, they also have this thing called a bank statement loan, where instead of using your tax returns, the lender would use like 12 months of bank statements, and the lender would give all this information to you, to the buyer. So they'll go by bank statements, seeing that money was always regularly coming into your bank account and what the expenses were going out. So it's another way that lenders can do a loan. And then a really exciting thing that's happening right now is it's a down payment assistance program, and it's for first-time home buyers, but even if you've owned a home in the past, you're considered to be a first-time home buyer if you haven't owned a home in 3 years. So say, years ago you owned like a townhome and you sold it, and then you've been renting for more than 3 years, you would qualify as a first-time home buyer. Now, there are other requirements to make you eligible for that down payment assistance. It's up to $35,000. It can be up to 5% of your down payment towards it. And it's a Florida program. Until it runs out of money, it's available for people that qualify. You need to have a 640 credit score. You have to have a full-time job. But there's a couple other qualifications that a lender would go over. But basically, you don't have to have a lot of money in the bank for a down payment if you can meet the requirements of this down payment assistance program. And it's free money, but when you sell your home, you are supposed to pay it back. Or when you refinance, you would have to pay it back, but they're not charging you interest for it. It's like free money until you sell. Does that make sense?
It does, but it seriously, I love the idea of it because so many young couples end up spending so much money on rent, and they can never get out of this cycle of rent because they can't afford the down payment and whatnot. But I understand. I'm not saying that rent is bad, but it's essentially just putting money like in the garbage. I understand that there's a time and place, and if you're not sure where you want to move and whatnot, it might be your best option for a while. But when you buy a home, at least when you're making these mortgage payments, that you're putting money back into yourself, and that eventually one day you can sell that home. And so I think it's great that there are more options for first-time home buyers and helping them get into their first home and really their first investment, because it's a big thing to do, and it's really hard to get there. So that's awesome. I didn't know about that. How can a realtor assist in helping couples determine their budget and finding homes within their price range?
So when you talk to your lender, they will help you with these things. And a lot of times they'll say, what kind of a monthly payment are you comfortable with? Sometimes people can get pre-approved for less than they're willing to pay, and some people can be approved for a lot more than they're comfortable with paying. So a lot of times they'll base it around your monthly payment. However, the lender, they'll ask you a lot of personal financial questions. You talk to them about all the money you owe, your debts, all your income, money coming in. And like I said, it's an awesome goal to have. And right now, with this down payment assistance program, I mean, if you meet the other criteria, you might not have to rent, you can just buy. But I understand that some people just, they might have to rent at first. Just always keep that goal out there.
Yeah.
My husband and I know that when we got married, we had to rent for 4 years before we could afford a house. We did it all on our own. No one helped us. And for our first home, when we sold it, we didn't make a lot of money. It was a very small house. But every single time we had like a bonus at work or an extra $100 gift, anytime we had any extra money, we paid it down on the principal of the mortgage once we had a house. And, and that's called a mortgage with no prepayment penalty. They're very common, but always make sure when you're talking to a lender that your mortgage doesn't have a prepayment penalty, because we were just paying down the principal. So when we sold it, even though the house, it was very tiny, we didn't sell it for much more than we bought it for, but we had a lot of equity because we had paid down so much of the mortgage. And then when we bought the second home, during the time we owned the second home, we paid off the mortgage altogether. We just were very into being as debt-free as possible. Yeah. But the point,
I cringe inside every time I see how much money goes towards interest and how much goes towards principal. Like, it's, if you can put money towards that principal. And there's, on the website, there's like a calculator that shows like, if you put a certain number, like a certain amount of money towards your principal, like more than you're required to each month, like how much money in the end you'll save. It's crazy.
So what a great goal to have, huh? Mm-hmm. If you can do it, do it. So I'm not a financial analyst or I'm not a CPA or an accountant, but I can help people with basic budgeting. If they say, I have absolutely no clue how to do a budget. I mean, that's,
thankfully my dad is kind of in the business, and so I had him to go to. But no, when we were engaged and I was like, we need to live somewhere. Maybe we should buy a house or maybe we should rent. It was like, well, I have no idea. Now I've learned a whole lot because we did buy a home, but at first, how are couples supposed to know? Like, how much of their income should they be spending on their rent or their mortgage, or how do you even begin this process? So it's great that you do help couples with this.
Yes. And there are lots of online, programs you can buy too. Like I know Dave Ramsey has one called Financial Peace, and my husband and I were kind of doing that before we knew of his program. Mm-hmm. But if you say to me, my husband's a CPA, so we were always kind of monitoring budgets to start with. But if you say to me, I don't, know where to start, I'd be happy to help. But those online programs would be awesome to get you started.
That's great. So what are some important considerations for couples when evaluating potential homes, such as size, amenities, and long-term growth potential?
So once again, a lot of this is like personal preference because some buyers they care more about amenities, like community amenities, like they want a clubhouse with a pool. They don't care to have a private pool. They want to go to the community pool and hang out with friends and rent the clubhouse for parties and things like that, birthday parties and stuff. And then other people say, I don't care about those things at all. I'm never going to go. Mm-hmm. I would rather not have that and have more of a house instead. So some of that is kind of personal preference. Another thing is some neighborhoods have this thing called an equity membership, where not only do you close on your home, but you have to pay a big chunk of money. You're actually getting ownership usually it's with golf courses. So they have to pay like a $60,000 membership to use the golf course. I mean, even if they're not going to use it, they have to pay it. And so that's really only good for someone who's going to golf every single day.
Use it. Yeah.
So, and then probably the most common home size that buyers go for is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So I'd say, as far as if you want appreciation and long-term growth, And by the way, the average property in our area appreciates like between 4 and 5% a year. Okay. The average. So not everybody, but some appreciate a lot more than that, some less. So, I would say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath is kind of like a good,
a good place to start.
Minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense. Can you provide some advice on navigating the offer and negotiation process to ensure couples are getting the best deal possible on their first home?
Sure. So, first and foremost, hire a real estate agent that is experienced, that listens to you, that cares about what you want, because it is a process to navigate. There's a lot of stuff.
Big process to navigate.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, just when you put an offer in on a house, there's a lot of stuff to explain that this is what you're also making these other promises. You're not just promising the price. You're promising a lot of deadlines. You're promising things. So what I normally do is when I have buyers that we've looked at homes, they've been pre-approved, they found a house they like. As a realtor, I check the comparables in the area and I say, what's a fair price? What have the homes like this one, been selling for in the neighborhood? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's priced really close to a fair price and sometimes it's not. So the comparables are usually like our backup of how we arrive at the offer price. So, that's what a good realtor will do. Also, a very strong lender letter, like I mentioned. Sometimes people want new construction, and a lot of times new construction, they offer incentives to buyers, like sometimes they will say, if you use our lender and our title company, we'll give you $7,000 towards your closing costs or something like that. So these are all things to consider, but I will help,
How does that work because I know with a new construction neighborhood, not everybody has to have a realtor. So if someone's working with you and then they go to a new construction community, do you still work with them?
Yes, I need to go with them though. Normally, most developers won't, of new construction, they won't recognize the buyer's realtor unless I go with them on the first visit. Some are nicer and they will, but most of them won't. I have to be with you. So I do like to tell my clients, please bring me with you. If don't just go without me.
Yeah.
And so even though they have their salespeople on site, I will still be helping my clients, with understanding the whole process of the home purchase.
Gotcha. My husband and I went to new construction and we didn't have a realtor to begin with. So we didn't have a realtor in the process, but my dad's experience, so I did have his advice, but it sounds like it would have been nice to have someone that's like in your corner, making sure that the deal is a fair deal and that helping you through the negotiation process and through the pros and cons and all of that.
And even if they won't let it, so they use a different contract than what realtors are trained on. But even if they won't let us change their contract, we can ask pertinent questions that might not come out if you didn't have your realtor with you. And then another thing to look for in a realtor is someone who has aligned themselves with a team of professionals, like a mortgage lender, a home inspector. I mean, this is in general, an attorney, an insurance agent for homeowners insurance. I have all of these corporate partners that if buyers come to me and they say, okay, we want to have a home inspection, but we don't know any inspectors, or we want to hire an attorney, but we don't know any attorneys. I will give them some names.
You have recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that couples should avoid when buying their first home?
Yes. So a couple of suggestions I have are, well, first of all, if it's new construction, generally there's a sales center and they'll show you a diagram and they'll say, okay, this lot, and this lot are available. I would say don't just choose your lot from the diagram. Make sure you drive past it, because sometimes there's some kind of a structure there that you wouldn't want on your yard, but you can't tell from the diagram. So that's just one idea. A big pitfall is once in a blue moon, well, I always recommend a home inspection. Once in a blue moon, someone tells me, I don't think I need a home inspection, but I say, this is more probably for a home that's not brand new.
Right.
Even a brand new home will have a punch list of items usually, that you can get addressed with the builder. But
a year and a half later, I'm still working on getting done.
So that's the thing. Even a brand new house has things. But to me, it's definitely a pitfall not to hire a home inspector. Sometimes people say, I have very talented people in my family that can help me, but you have to pay the home inspector, but it's the biggest purchase probably of your life. You might as well, and find out everything there is to find out about the home. And keep in mind that the home inspector's job is to tell you about things. He's not saying everything is a deal breaker.
Right.
Usually it's a lot of just little things. So, and another pitfall is I highly recommend having an attorney. An attorney, it's called, when they monitor the whole process, it's called transaction review. And I know that an attorney that I work with a lot offers discounts to my Keller Williams clients.
Okay.
Like normally he charges like almost $2,000 to do this. But if you're my client, it's around $1,200. So it's a discount. And I know a lot of people think, well, why do I need an attorney? I have a realtor, but we're not attorneys, We're not home inspectors. We're not attorneys. And, the attorney definitely adds value. There is some legal paperwork, especially when you get into like the loan commitment, which is like the title insurance, that's where an attorney really comes into play. And even if they don't come to your closing, they review everything. And so it's called transaction review. They review everything from start to finish. And they raise, if there's a red flag, they want to get it fixed, before closing.
No, that is very helpful just to, be sure, because it's a huge purchase. And if there are things in that contract that aren't right, that you're just not aware of, then you're stuck with it. And that could be, I could imagine that could be very dangerous for people and unfortunate if they get locked into things that they just didn't understand, but it wasn't really correct or in their favor.
Yeah. And just to give you an example, I've been a realtor for over 16 years. If I buy real estate, I hire an attorney, to review everything. Yeah. Because like I said, there's parts of it that are more legal and realtors don't, get trained on part of it.
Right.
It's like the title commitment. It's like a legal document. So anyway, I'm just giving an example that I would always hire an attorney, and I'm trained on our contracts, but this goes beyond your contract.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, I know that your work is not in weddings, but I do think it ties because so many couples that are getting married are looking to buy a first home. So I really appreciate you being here. I think this was so helpful for people. Do you have any wedding horror stories?
Well, this isn't really a horror story at the wedding, but a thing that I would have done differently is that a while back, my husband and I were invited to a wedding, and the father of the bride said to her, you can either have $220,000 or you can have the wedding of your dreams. And she chose the wedding of her dreams, probably because in her mind she thought it's going to cost more than $220,000. Well, if that were me, I would have just had a nice normal wedding and kept the rest. I would have taken the money and just had a regular nice wedding and then had this nest egg for my first house, So she was very blessed to have a dad that could offer that. But, so that wasn't a horror story. It's just, I would have done it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. To each their own, but I can tell you on the wedding planning side, you can have a beautiful wedding for a lot less money than that. It doesn't have to be $220,000. Even if you're not going for that tight budget wedding, you can still have a very beautiful wedding for somewhere, in the middle there, not up at $220,000. And then you can save some of that money for something like your first home, for after the wedding day.
Yes, because like I said in the beginning, I'm really a believer that home ownership builds wealth. In my own life, my husband and I didn't really start having wealth until we owned real estate, and paid it off and then becoming debt free. I just think those are good goals to always have. Even if you feel like, oh, that's so far off for me. I mean, just keep making it, if it's a goal, you'll keep working towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every little bit counts and it adds up fast. And yeah, it's a good goal and keep working towards it. So all of this has been great advice, but do you have one last piece of advice for our listeners?
So I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to find a realtor that's going to work hard for you. I want to mention that when you're the buyer, hiring a realtor is free. You don't have to have money to hire a realtor. In our area of Florida, the seller pays the realtor fee. So that's already been decided before we even find the house that you want to buy. So it's free for the buyer to hire a realtor. And I would say hire a realtor that has experience and has integrity, that will listen to you, that cares about your wants and needs, and just has professionalism. And if you hire me, I will do those things.
Yes. So if they want to hire you or just talk with you and ask you questions, where can they find you?
Okay, my email address is Cheri Wellman at kw.com. That's CheriWellman at kw.com. That's for Keller Williams. My phone number is 561-371-3871. And my website is CheriSellsSouthFlorida.com. You can contact me anyway, but of course it's easy to text me or call me anytime. And I did want to offer a promotion for your listener, Sydney. If someone calls me and wants to purchase a home from me and they mention your podcast or your name or your business, Delightful Planning, I will at closing give them a $500 credit towards their closing costs. And all they have to do is mention that they heard this podcast or that they know about you. And it doesn't even have to be a couple planning a marriage. I mean, it could be their parents, or it could be a friend or a cousin. It could be, as long as they, mention that they know Sydney or they know Sydney's work or her podcasts. I would love to do that.
Well, that is so nice of you. I'm so appreciative of that. So you guys, if you're in South Florida, and you're looking to buy a home, or someone in your family is, just mention this podcast or my name. Thank you so much for offering that. That's so generous of you. And I really appreciate that. And I hope that our listeners take advantage of that.
It's my pleasure to do that.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all the advice that you gave. And it's really planning a wedding is such a big thing, but buying your first home is another big thing. And a lot of the couples are probably doing both at the same time. So I really appreciate your advice and you being here. This was fantastic.
Thanks so much, Sydney. And, like I said, I know things can come up that seem stressful, but my goal is to make it as stress-free as possible when someone's buying a home. So, just to navigate that process with you, to communicate with you, explain it all to you. You won't have to wonder what's happening, so we're just here to make it as smooth as possible.
I'm sure I can only imagine how grateful your clients are, because you're so sweet, and I'm sure that you help them so much. So thank you. You guys reach out to her if you're looking for a home, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.